Thank you. Thank you so much for joining. First, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Paul Rain, for having this tech talk. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and then it's going to be your your time to tell us about your presentation.
Mhm.
Mr. Paul Rain is an award-winning teacher, presenter, author, and developer. His books include the best-selling 50 Ways to Teach with Technology and the innovative multi-path graded reader, Journey to Mars. He has helped design and develop several websites for teachers and learners of EFL, including speechcoach.io and ego.ai. He has published numerous research articles on the teaching and learning of English as a second language and is particularly interested in CAL. He currently lives and teaches English in Japan. Thank you so much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and it's very good to be here. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to come listen to my presentation. So yes, I'll just jump straight in. Today I'm going to talk about Ego AI, which is the world's first fully AI-powered four skills platform for English language learners that we know of. So that's quite a mouthful for a subtitle, but we have to have a few caveats in there because we're not the first, speaking app or the first listening app, but we're the first four skills, I think, that we know of that's fully AI powered. And I'm the founder of Ago AI. My name is Paul. As it was mentioned earlier, I've been involved in call for quite a long time. I've been teaching in Japan since 2006, and I've developed a few websites that some of you may have used or heard of. This is the latest one, which is developed in the light of generative AI and the affordances it can give to language teachers. So this is the content of my presentation. I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to debunk some straw man arguments because these always come up and it's good to get them out of the way early on. Then I'm going to look at some basic assumptions about English learning, then some technologies in English teaching, and then finally the one platform that brings it all together, which I argue is Ago AI. So first, let's look at some straw man arguments and why they're not particularly helpful to this debate. Strawman argument number one. Now, whenever you see AI on social media, you invariably see an image of a robot. First of all, AI is not necessarily robotics. In fact, the current generation of AI is not really robotics. I just actually saw an announcement from the CEO of NVIDIA saying that embodied AI is coming, but it's not quite here yet, but it is coming. But the AI, the generative AI that we all know and use, and perhaps some of us fear in the classroom, is not embodied AI. So we don't need to think about robots when we think about AI. Um, and the argument is that, AI will completely replace human language teachers or human teachers of any discipline. I'm arguing, and it's just my opinion, but I strongly believe that they won't. Some people have been saying something along the lines of teachers who use AI will replace those who don't. I don't really think that's true either. I think that some teachers eventually, to some extent, might replace those who don't, but there'll always be room and a value to face-to-face teaching that doesn't use technology at all. Never mind AI, there's still plenty of value in that approach to teaching languages. And I think that AI will be used to supplement and augment more traditional teaching and learning approaches and methods. These tried and tested methods that have been around for a long time, they're not just going to suddenly stop being useful or effective, but we're going to use AI and other technologies to supplement and augment these to make us more effective and more efficient teachers and learners of languages. Um, Strawman argument number two. We need an entirely new set of theories to explain or justify AI technologies. Again, I don't think we do. That's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We have a very solid set of theory for language learning. We pretty much understand how it works and how to foster language learning as teachers. I do think some new theories will emerge and old ones will need updating. One I can think of at the top of my head is the theories associated with Vygotsky, who talked about the proximal zone of development and a more knowledgeable other, for example. Well, perhaps the more knowledgeable other can be an AI. It doesn't have to be a human. So all theories will be updated, but they won't be entirely thrown away or replaced by a new set of theories. We may need to reevaluate our teaching and learning approaches and methods in the light of AI. Yes, of course, we need to do that, but we don't need to, completely come up with a new way of teaching and learning languages, I think. Strawman argument number 3, AI will completely negate the need to learn foreign languages. This image here is the PocketTalk device, which is being strongly promoted in Japan, where I live and work, as basically an alternative to learning a foreign language. The argument is you can simply whip out this device, speak in your own language, have it translate, and then it will speak in the target language. Another way of doing this would be to have some augmented glasses that when someone is talking to you in a foreign language, it shows subtitles in your own language. It's kind of like the Star Trek Universal Translator, or if you like the work of Douglas Adams, the Babelfish, that little device that sits in your ear and translates everything. Don't get me wrong, these devices are very powerful, very helpful in certain contexts, but they won't completely negate the need to learn foreign languages. I think instrumental motivation to learn might decline in certain contexts. If you have somebody who's traveling, maybe to multiple countries, they don't want or have time to learn the language of every country they're visiting, then they might rely on one of these devices more than they would in the past. And I think intrinsic and integrated motivation will become even more important. I don't think that for deep, meaningful human relationships, that they're going to be technology mediated completely. If the person that you want to be with, or your friends or coworkers, or even family members, you're going to want to have a non-technology mediated relationship with them. Again, this is just my opinion, but this is part of the debate that we're having right now. So those are the strawman arguments that always come up, and I think they kind of distract from the main argument, which is, so our main job as teachers, which is to figure out how to use AI to enhance and to assist the language learning process rather than to negate or to avoid that process. So let's look at some basic assumptions of language learning. I've used dinosaurs to illustrate this, not because these are out of date or have been killed off, as I've already said, that's not the case. Just that they've been around for a long time, not quite as long as the dinosaurs have, but at least since the early 80s, which is as long as I've been alive, and perhaps some of you in the audience as well. But most of the theories that I'm looking at here pretty much sprung up in the early 80s. So they've been around for, getting on for half a century. So the first assumption is that learners must read and listen to a lot of English slightly above their current level. This is most closely associated with the academic Stephen Krashen, which I'm hoping most of you have heard of. And this is what he calls comprehensible input. So we need as language learners need to read and listen to a lot of comprehensible input, which is only slightly above their current level. And as teachers, it's our job to know the level of our classes through various tools and intuition, and we have to ensure that it is comprehensible to them. We can make it more comprehensible. We do that now by using gestures, by using pictures. When we show a video, we include subtitles, captions. There's many different ways to make input more comprehensible, and I think AI will help us to do that. Basic assumption number 2, Learners must speak and write a lot of English as well as read and listen to it. Now, if you're a hardline Krashenite, and Krashen, by the way, has stuck by this assertion for as long as he's been presenting and talking and writing, he thinks that all you need is comprehensible input to learn a language. But most other academics and teachers admit or argue that it's not just input, it's also output. And this is most closely associated with the work of Merrill Swain, who showed that, students need to talk more in order to test hypotheses about the language. So they actually need to produce the language, not just to listen and read it. And when they do so, they know if they're using it correctly or not, depending on whether the person they're talking to understands them and if they're getting the results that they're trying to obtain by using the language. So input is important, output is equally important. Basic assumption number 3, learners should receive corrected feedback on their spoken and written errors and inaccuracies. This is very closely associated with the work of Rod Ellis, again, writing like early to mid 80s. He said that, learners need to get feedback so they know when they've made a mistake, they need to be able to correct the mistake, and this, eventually help them to become better speakers, writers, and users of the language. Now, we need to slightly moderate this in the light of ELF, which is English as a lingua franca. We shouldn't be overly penalizing students. The criterion should be comprehensibility and intelligibility, not necessarily talking exactly like a native speaker. Unless the student has that as their goal, and that's what they want to achieve, we shouldn't be dogmatic about that in the 21st century. Basic assumption number 4. Learners should practice what they already know to become more fluent speakers and writers of English. Paul Nation is very closely associated with this one. Again, hardline, if you're a hardline Krashenite, Krashen believes that practice is not learning. Again, it's just input. Practice is kind of just wasting your time. I think most teachers and common sense and other theory beyond Krashen supports the idea that speaking more makes you a better speaker and writing more makes you a better writer of English or whatever other language you're trying to learn. Basic assumption number 5, learners must have meaningful interactions with other users of English. And this is very closely associated with the work of Long. Basically, you have to have not only the input and the output and the corrective feedback and everything else, but you actually need to have real meaningful conversations, interactions. They could be written, they could be spoken, but you need to have meaningful interactions. Now, traditionally, of course, other users of the language or other users of English have been human. We're now living in a society which has developed very powerful technology which simulates human interaction. There's some debate out there about whether generative AI is conscious or not. I think that's another straw man or a red herring. It's not really that important for us, but it appears to be conscious, and that's what matters. It appears to be able to understand and take part in a conversation and make the conversation meaningful. And that's what's important in terms of the theory of language learning. Okay, so those are the basic assumptions I was working on when I developed Ago AI. So comprehensible input, meaningful output, feedback, practice, and meaningful interactions. So I think that if we can foster and support and provide opportunities to do these things using AI, that will result in language learning. So bringing it into the AI technologies, there are many different AI technologies. Not all of them are generative AI. Some have been around a lot longer than generative AI. These are some that have been around and also some that have developed a lot more recently than they have in the past. So automatic speech recognition, ASR, text-to-speech, TTS, machine translation, MT, and generative AI, Gen AI. So looking at automatic speech recognition, this is when we use a computer to give students feedback on either the accentedness or the intelligibility of their pronunciation. Sometimes it's called goodness of pronunciation, GOP, goodness of pronunciation. This system is developed by Microsoft, the one you can see the screenshot of here, and it gives feedback on accuracy, fluency, and completeness, and it compares the learner's utterances to native speaker models, usually US English. They do also have British English and I think Australian English models, but they do tend to be like inner circle, native models. There are other systems out there that have tried to develop global models of English pronunciation, which, we can use for different purposes. It depends on the teachers and the learners' goals. Do they want to do accent reduction or do they want to do intelligibility remediation? Those are two quite different goals when it comes to ASR. Then we have TTS. TTS is using a computer to speak. In the past, it was very robotic. Think of the way that Stephen Hawking used to talk, or the system that he used to talk, very stilted, unnatural. It's come on a lot in recent years, and it's becoming almost indistinguishable from actual human speech. And you can also clone your voice as well with AI. So it can not only be an AI voice, it could be your voice that's been cloned by AI, or even the student's voice that's been cloned by AI. So they can listen to themselves speaking in a more perhaps sophisticated way, and that might be more motivational to them. Here you can see that text-to-speech is being accompanied by an image, a caption, and an avatar. The woman on the right is a real person, but she has never said this sentence, as far as I know. But we can now make avatars speak, and then that accompanies the audio, and we can put an image in there, captions, so it becomes, excuse me, multimodal. And links into theories of dual coding. For example, when you have an image and you have a word, it's a more powerful impact on memory. This is sorry, the title is wrong here. It should be machine translation. This is how one we can use machine translation. In this, we've looked at the word Turkey as in the country Turkey, and we translated it into Japanese, which is Toruko. Now, one problem with using computers to translate words is that they don't always know which sense of the word we want to get back. So Turkey is a country, of course, but it's also an animal. Now, how does the computer know without context whether it's the country or the animal? Well, the country is capitalized and the animal is not. But in this case, or not in this case, but in some cases, it might be the first word in a sentence. So it's not always easy to know just by capitalization. So anyway, generative AI has allowed us to give the system more context, and then it can figure out, well, which sense of the word we want to define. And that's very, very powerful technology, I think. We can also support many different languages. I think the most recent version of OpenAI GPT supports around 60 languages, 60, but some are supported better than others. And English is the best supported language, all of the OpenAI technologies. We can also use generative AI to create different leveled texts. Now, as English teachers, I'm assuming you're all familiar with like graded readers. Big companies like Oxford and Cambridge, they publish graded readers. Sometimes they simplify classic stories like, Alice in Wonderland or whatever. They make it easier to read. They have a certain number of head words. The syntax is simpler, the vocabulary is more common. We do the same thing. We can do the same thing with generative AI. you can ask the system to create a text, for example, about coffee, and you tell it, well, this is for a beginner level learner of English, so please write it to be suitable for a beginner level learner of English. And that's what we do with Ego AI. Now you can see that this does kind of correlate with the word frequency. So at the bottom here, and by the way, we're using Charlie Brown's word lists, the NGSL and the NAWL, New General Service List and New Academic Word List, to just check whether the vocabulary in the beginner, intermediate, and advanced is actually leveled appropriately. So here we have 73 common words, no academic words, 3 uncommon words, 5 proper nouns, etc. And when a student clicks on the word, they can get the definition of the word. Now, if we go to the intermediate version of that article, we see there's 3 common words, 3 academic words, 11 uncommon words. So the number of uncommon words, which means they're not in the first 2,000 words of the NGSL, increases. Yeah. And then finally, for the advanced, we have 19 uncommon words, 8 academic words, and 103 common words. But in general, what I tell students, and this is what Charlie Brown, I think his theory suggests, is that for common words, they need to be learned first, and they will come in useful for a wide variety of texts. I think they cover like over 98% of all English texts. So the words in 98% of all English texts appear in the NGSL first 2,800 words, I think. The other words may only be useful for understanding this particular reading passage, like revere, permeate, gastronomic. They might not encounter that word again for a long, long, long time, but they need to know it in order to understand this particular passage. So that's a useful information to have as well. Um, so this is Ego AI's lesson library. So again, leveraging the power of generative AI, we can create reading and listening, comprehensible input, reading and listening in different levels. Now, some teachers have experimented with asking, AI to create Cepher A1, Cepher A2, Cepher B1, Cepher B2. I don't think that Gen AI understands well enough what those terms mean to be able to accurately create that level of nuanced content. But beginner, intermediate, and advanced, it does understand, and it can, create these texts, which to me very much look beginner, intermediate, and advanced. Now, beginner might be like A2, probably not A1, but starting at A2, I think would be reasonable. This is an example of using generative AI to give localized feedback. So again, coming back to the assumption about students need feedback on their writing and their speaking, we can give feedback in the student's L1. This is very important because if you're giving feedback on student writing and you're using a lot of metalinguistic terms to do so, like, oh, you need to insert a preposition here, this subject-verb agreement is not correct. If they're beginners, the explanation is just way over their head. They can't understand it. You're going to need to give the feedback in their L1. And so we can use generative AI to do that as well. And so this brings me on to the platform Ego AI. This is what I hope brings all of this theory together and updates it for the post-generative AI world that we're living in. I'm just going to pause there for 1 second and invite any questions. Maybe you could put them in the chat if anyone has any questions. If not, I'll just continue. But I just want to give a chance for a quick pause there. Yeah, it's okay if there aren't, but I just want to give people a chance if they're holding on to a question. No, maybe not. Okay, go ahead, Maud. Wonder if you want to write your question, might be easier. Ah, I think you mean for these words at the bottom of the reading passages. It's actually Charlie Brown's word list. It's called the NGSL, which is the New General Service List, and the NAWL, which is the New Academic Word List. And these come from an academic who's very well known in Japan and other countries, called Charlie Brown. And yeah, those are the word lists we're using for this analysis here. Yeah. Okay, I'll go on. If people have questions, by the way, please feel free to type them in the chat anytime. So this is Ego AI. We launched in January 2023. ChatGPT, by the way, came out in November 22. So, we launched a couple of months after ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the thing that basically changed everything. It was like Google went on red alerts, Microsoft and all the other big tech companies were caught like really pretty much unaware, although Microsoft are now very big investors in OpenAI, ChatGPT. But it's the one that basically people thought, okay, maybe the AI is conscious now. Like, how is this gonna? And then some professors around the world starting declaring the death of the essay, because uh, GPT can write as well as PhD level students can write. So it has really upended a lot of traditional methods and approaches that we've been using up until that point. Um, so Ego AI is being used all around the world, particularly in Japan because that's where I'm based, but also in the Middle East, in South America, all around the world. And well, we have a lesson library. We have hundreds of lessons across different topics such as science, culture, society, history, and many more. And we publish new lessons on a weekly basis. We try to keep it topical, interesting, relevant, both to young and old people, regardless of political affiliation, etc. We just try to keep it, interesting, relevant, like a kind of a National Geographic or Economist type magazine style articles that are factual, but also could be, related to other topics. Uh, Students can choose their level, either beginner, intermediate, or advanced, as I said before, and then they can study the same lesson in beginner and then intermediate and advanced, or they can go through the lesson library all at beginner level or all at intermediate level. They have to find a level that they're comfortable with. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, it's the only platform that I know of that covers all four skills. Now, I think this is really important because the different skills, they complement each other, they feed into each other. If you're a better reader, you're a better writer. If you're a better listener, you're a better speaker, and they're all interconnected. You can't just take one and say, well, the student can't speak very well. Let's make them speak, for 20 hours a day or whatever. You need to have the four skills, and it's really important to have all four skills. Um, another really essential thing is learning words, and vocabulary is the basis of any language. There's that famous quote about, without grammar you can make yourself understood, but without vocabulary you really cannot. So, you throw rock, or man, danger, sea, shark. You can kind of piece together what they're trying to say, but just with vocabulary. So vocabulary is really essential, as we all know. And so we allow students to learn lots of new words. And when they click a word, it goes into their word bank and they can refer back to it and they can see it being used in different contexts. They can get feedback on speaking. So we have two different kinds of feedback on speaking. One is the pronunciation and fluency feedback, which is more, I guess, somewhere between accent reduction and intelligibility remediation. And the other is more general feedback on how they can participate in a conversation with AI. And they can also get feedback on their writing. Again, it will be across 5 rubrics. So one rubric with 5 criteria, which I'll show you a bit later. And then finally, they can discuss with AI. So all of these activities are building up to a discussion with AI. You can't, in my opinion, you can't just throw students into a conversation with ChatGPT and say, hey, there you go, learn English. Doesn't it's not the way learning works. You need to build up slowly. That's why we have teaching approaches like PPP, present, practice, produce, presentation, practice, production, where students first get the comprehensible input, then they get some controlled practice, and then finally they get more free practice. It's the same as, when the internet became popular in the late 90s, you couldn't just say to students, there you go, there's the internet, go and learn English. I mean, some students can do that to some extent because they're self-motivated, self-organized, but most can't because it's not organized. The information is not presented in a very consumable form. So Ego AI tries to solve that problem. Finally, we also allow students to track progress. Again, as teachers, most of us have to give a grade at the end of the semester. Some of us get cold sweats when the grading period, comes up, because we know that it's not necessarily really what we're trying to do. Like you're an A or a B or a C. We're trying to create students who can communicate and feel confident, but we have to give grades, and therefore we have to track progress. And we need a system. Again, this is why you can't just throw students into ChatGPT and say, hey, go learn English, because we need to keep records and evidence. How much are they doing? How often? What are they getting the questions correct or not? We need all that information. So that Ego AI solves that problem as well. And so, okay, so that's the overview of the platform. I'll just give a few examples of some activities now. So this is our lesson library. Let me just switch to beginner level. So you'll see all the lessons in beginner level. Again, you can easily switch your level just by clicking beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And the whole library of content updates as soon as you click the level. This is our latest lesson about green architecture. This is a lesson about a man who sold land on the moon, forbidden places around the world, history of bullet trains, small house movement, history of Swiss Army knives. So, by the way, we do take suggestions from teachers. So if you have topics that you would like to see in the Ego AI library, you can just drop me a line, paul@ego.ai, and we will add that topic or that lesson. If you want more control over the lesson, we actually offer custom lessons to match your curriculum. That's a paid service. But if you just want to suggest some topics, that's completely free, and we welcome and we ask you to do that. So let's look at this lesson about the man who sold land on the moon, because it's quite interesting and funny. All of these are factual, by the way. So graded readers tend to be fiction, narratives, Ego AI content is all factual. And any of you who've used generative AI know it's prone to what they call hallucinate and to make things up. As the models improve, so Ego AI started off using ChatGPT 4 and then 4 Turbo, and then I can't remember what came before O1, but now it's using O1, which is the most recent. Actually, the most recent is now O3. Anyway, it's using a very, very advanced model within OpenAI's catalog of models. So it hallucinates very infrequently, is the upshot of that. But we still also check, we proofread all of the lessons to make sure that they're factually correct, pedagogically correct, phonologically correct, grammatically correct, all of that English learners need to know that that's reliable. So here's a lesson about a man who saw land on the moon. It starts with a video with an avatar and caption. I'll just play a little section of this.
There was a man named Dennis Hope. He had a big idea. He wanted to sell land
Oops.
on the moon. He said, "No one owns the moon."
Okay, my connection is not super fast right now, so I hope you were able to hear that. Were you able to hear that? Yeah, okay. So most of the videos are quite short, by the way, under a minute, because we found that the bite-sized length of video is just students prefer it, and they can maintain like I say 5-minute or 10-minute video. And also they have, 7 activities to get through. So if we had a 10-minute video, it would make the whole lesson really, really, really long. And we want it to be something the students can do in, say, 20 to 30 minutes. So they can complete the entire lesson in 20 to 30 minutes. It could take longer, or they could do it more quickly, but that's the average. Watch the video. The next is a listening activity. And by the way, we're tracking time on task for everything. This is a new feature we added recently. We're tracking time on task. So one thing this allows you to do is cross-reference. Say, if they got a really good score, but they got it within 3 seconds, it's like, well, that probably looks a bit suspicious. So it helps you to weed out academic dishonesty as well. Then we have a listening gap fill activity. So we play.
There was a man named Dennis Hope. He had a big idea. He wanted to sell land on the moon. He said, "No one owns the moon. I will claim it." He sent letters to the United Nations.
So they have to type the missing words like this. They can't submit, by the way, until they type something for each question. I'll just put in some nonsense there. And you'll see in a minute that it grades and gives me instant feedback, which again, we said was very, very important to get instant feedback. And they can redo this. This is optional, by the way. If you have an institutional account at AGO AI, you can enable or disable the students' resubmission. If you only want them to do it one time, that's okay. If you want them to have multiple attempts, also okay. Then we have the reading activity, which I did earlier. I'll just redo this one. So you'll be able to see me answering the questions. And again, we have the reading passage. We can click on any word to get a definition of the word. So I'm going to click on, say, for example, okay, moon. We should get, we're on beginner level now, so we should get a beginner level definition. Now, this is perhaps just a little bit difficult, natural satellite, but ideally these should be easier than the word they define. But we're working on improving these to make sure that they're not harder than the word they define. Also, the definitions can be given in the student's L1, which will obviously make them much easier because they already know their L1. So, okay. So then we have 5 questions. So let's just answer these, some of these correctly and some incorrectly. Okay. And submit. One thing we're doing for more recent lessons, by the way, is we have 8 questions, but we only show the student 5, and the 5 questions they get are randomized. So again, this is to try to mitigate the possibility of answer sharing or academic dishonesty. That's an option again for institutions. Then we have the speaking activity, which is the listen and repeat.
Dennis Hope had a big idea to sell land on the moon.
So again, because my connection is not super fast, I might take a while to get feedback, but I'll try one of these. So Dennis Hope had a big idea to sell land on the moon. And it will, again, compare my attempt to a native speaker model. I got 99%. It's not always possible to get 100%. Sometimes the microphone quality of the microphone or background noise. I just tell my students to aim for, say, over 90 or over 95. If you're over 95, you're perfectly intelligible, and you probably sound perfectly natural as well. They can click on the word to see exactly where the issue was. So again, because this is such a high score, I wouldn't look any further into this example here. But if the score is lower, the word will be colored orange or red. If it's red, they really need to try again. If it's orange, they might want to try again or not. Okay, so that's the speaking activity. We go on to review activity. This is just basically matching definitions to, words to definitions. So we go down the list here, match all of these. All of these, of course, come from the reading passage. So it's a reinforcement and a review of vocabulary. Let's submit that. Okay, I didn't get any correct. That's good. Well, not good, but it shows you that, they get instant feedback. And again, they get to know what the answers are. This, again, can be turned on or off. So you don't want students just clicking through, submitting any answers, and then seeing what the actual answers are, and then resubmitting a perfect score. You can choose as a teacher to only show them which questions they got wrong without telling them what the correct answers are. So again, that's an option for teachers. Okay. A writing activity, we have a prompt, and the student has to write a response to the prompt. The minimum and maximum amount of words can be configured by the teacher. Um, 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 Something like that. Again, I just type a bit more here. Um, okay, so I've made some kind of basic grammar mistakes just to show you what kind of feedback we'll get. And then we can submit that. And then in a few moments, AI will return some feedback and a score for the student across 5 different criteria. And these rubrics, we're working on improving them. This got a 60% score, which I guess is okay. I did answer the question, even though I didn't answer it perfectly. And you can see how the score has been split into these different 5 criteria. So punctuation, spelling and grammar, vocabulary and word choice, coherence, relevance to question, details, reasons, and examples. The feedback it gives generally kind of coincides with the feedback that I would give if I was giving feedback on the same report. The scores, by the way, there's a little bit of debate about whether it's prudent to allow generative AI to give numeric quantitative feedback. It's really trained to give qualitative feedback. Quantitative feedback, we're not really sure about. In my experience, the quantitative feedback is like plus or minus 3 to 4 points either way. So 10 out of 20 will never become 0 out of 20. No matter how many times you submit the same text, 10 out of 20 is never going to become 5 or 0 out of 20. It might become 8 or it might become 12. There's a little bit of variation, as there would be if you gave the same piece of student writing to 5 human teachers. They wouldn't all give exactly the same numerical score unless they'd been trained on a very, very, very strict rubric. This is more kind of broad stroke feedback. And again, I wouldn't use this for summative assessment. For formative assessment, to give students feedback on a weekly or even a daily basis, we should be using AI to do things that we can't do at all or we can't do as well as AI. I cannot give feedback to a class of 30 students every day for 15 weeks in their L1. I can't do that. So we can, but AI can do that. That's where we're supplementing and augmenting traditional approaches and methods with AI-powered ones and not throwing away everything and starting from scratch. Okay. Finally, we have a discussion with AI.
Hi there. Let's talk about the topic, the man who sold land on the moon. What did you learn in this lesson?
And this is where we can chat with AI about, so we've been building up to this the whole time. It's scaffolding, 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 comprehensible input, listen and repeat, meaningful output. And now I guess we're on the meaningful output stage of the lesson. So I'm going to just repeat the ideas that I mentioned in the writing. And let's see what the AI replies to that.
That's a good point. No one owns the moon. Why do you think people bought land there?
So the AI has been instructed to do several things. One is to always reply in English and not let the student go off into another language. One is to correct or to recast mistakes. So you'll see here, it's not explicitly correcting the mistake, it's just recasting. And it can be demotivational to always directly correct a mistake. We should perhaps do that every time. Sometimes we do need to do that, but other times not. So recasting a mistake to show, oh, I understood what you were saying, but perhaps you want to say it like this. Then also it's been trained to give a follow-up question every time, so the student remains engaged in the conversation. And finally, it's been told not to let the student change the topic, which I could try to do. It shouldn't allow me to do this. Again, it's not 100% reliable, but it shouldn't allow me to change topics. Yeah.
We're talking about the moon now. What is your opinion about
So
Dennis
it will
Hope?
gently, try to put the learner back on task. So again, the AI systems that we're using have guardrails. You can't do things that you can't do in real life conversation. You can't incite violence. You can't have unacceptable political opinion. You can't express unacceptable political opinions, etc. All of that stuff. But again, you can't, even with those guardrails, you can't throw a student into ChatGPT and expect them to learn in any meaningful way. You need more tightly controlled guardrails, which keep them in the target language, keep them on topic, keep them in the conversation. And that's what Ego AI is adding to the equation. So, okay. And by the way, you can also interact by voice.
Yes, he was. He had a unique idea. What do you
I'll
think
just try
made
to
his idea
demonstrate that, and that will be
successful?
the last thing that I show for this particular talk. Well, he was the first one to think of claiming the moon. So I think the fact that he was the first made a big difference because everybody else couldn't do the same thing afterwards. Okay. Again, I'm sorry my connection at the moment is a bit slow. It's usually quite fast.
That's a smart observation. Being the first can be very important. Did you like the
Okay.
story
So
about
again,
him?
because we're on beginner level, the AI is much using much simplified questions and responses. If you step up to intermediate and advanced, you can have a very, very deep, sophisticated debate with the AI about these topics, debate or conversation, depending on what you want to do as a learner. And finally, when you're happy, again, the teacher can specify the minimum and maximum number of turns in the conversation. So this conversation has, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 turns. So anytime that the conversation is more than the minimum, the student can terminate the conversation.
Thank you for discussing this topic with me. We have reached the end of our conversation. Click Submit to
And
get your
finally,
score
they
and
can get
evaluation.
feedback on the conversation, on the dialogue. And it's the same 5 criteria for the writing rubric. Now, we know that, dialogue and writing are not the same. And so we're working on improving and changing this rubric for the discussion. But so students get to see a transcript of the conversation. The teacher would see this too, by the way. And you can see whether the student typed or spoke their response, very important. And you can see the feedback the AI gave to the student about their conversation. Finally, we have a little plagiarism check. This simply checks whether the student repeated word for word any sentences from the reading passage. We have the same plagiarism check for the writing section, by the way. We don't currently check whether the student used any AI tools to compose their response, but we do prohibit copy and paste. But that doesn't stop students from creating something and typing it out. But we are looking at integrating something like GPT-0, which has shown promise in identifying whether or not a text was AI generated. Okay, that is the presentation and the demonstration of the website. And I think, again, I'll invite questions if there are any or comments. If people have questions later, would like to do an institutional trial or a pilot of Ago AI, you can contact me, paul@ago.ai or ago.ai/contact. We do have a free account for teachers, which you can use to demonstrate the platform to your students. So please just reach out to me if you'd like to try.
Thank you so much. I was actually wondering about the discuss feature that
Yeah.
you showed us last, where the student has the option to record, so audio record. I was wondering if their English was not very comprehensible, what would the AI reply to them? Would
So
it
it
say
would
like
basically
repeat or?
well, it would try to understand what they're saying. So AI acts like a human being, right? So if you were talking to a student in your class and you couldn't quite understand what they said, you might ask a clarification question. You might try to recast what they said. So sometimes the AI says, "I didn't understand what you were saying. Could you try again?" Or sometimes it will just recast to say, "Did you mean X, Y, Z?" Yeah. So I would invite you to go ahead and try it and try speaking in more or less comprehensible ways and see how it does. One thing we've done actually is, so for example, some lessons contain quite rare words or proper nouns. For example, we had this lesson about the Swiss Army knife and another lesson about platypus and this guy, oh yeah, Matsushita, Konosuke Matsushita. So we told the speech recognizer that the student will probably say the word Matsushita or Konosuke Matsushita. So the recognizer is primed for these rare words. So that means that they can it will more it is more likely to recognize a badly pronounced word that is rare, a rare word that appears in the reading passage. So that's something that we have done. Yeah, because what I found was that students were getting frustrated if they were saying a word like Matsushita in their own language, but the AI wasn't recognizing it, causes frustration. So you need to make sure that the recognizer can understand what they're saying. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think again, the next step for anyone who's interested is to register for the platform. When you first register, it asks you for some biodata. One of the questions is, are you a teacher or a learner? If you click I'm a teacher, after that, you will be automatically invited to switch to a teacher account. Yeah, and if you decide to do so, you can also follow up that with a pilot. And yes, Ego AI has a forever free option for teachers and for students. But if you want all of the advanced, more sophisticated controls and options, and you want students to do more speaking and more writing practice, then you will need to purchase an institutional account for your school. The pricing is very reasonable. Just reach out to me and I can send you all the information about that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, Maud is saying we can tell that you've been testing on students. It's great.
Thank you. Yes. Actually, well, yeah, because I use this in all of my own classes as well. So, I don't I'm able to get feedback firsthand and then to implement that feedback directly into the platform. It's a very tight circle of feedback. So but I'm working in the Japanese context, but I am getting feedback from people, I said, in South America, in the Middle East, and all over Southeast Asia, in Europe. So I'm trying to make it as useful as I can to people in different contexts, different motivations, different interests as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This is the email. In case you have any questions, you can, I think, directly contact Paul. Thank you so much for this informative tech talk. I definitely learned a lot about Ego AI, and I hope our audience also benefited from this presentation. Thank you, Mary, for your comment. I included a link to a feedback questionnaire if you wanna give us your feedback, comments for future Tech Talks. Thank you so much, Paul. If you have any final thought that you want to share, but thank you so much for your time and for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it really. And just as I said, reach out to me, and I'd really appreciate anyone who has any questions at all. There are no stupid questions, so please, anything at all is great.
And we will
Thank you.
be posting the recording to today's Tech Talk on our site, on our Google site, so you can also watch it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Good night, good morning, depending on where you are, and hopefully see you around.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.